Sup, guys? 2-0 yesterday. I think I'm on a 6-game win streak right now. It feels good. It feels like I'm turning it around. It feels like I'm seeing things. I'm only going to have one baseball play today, and we'll see if that continues. Today's baseball card has kind of thrown me for a bit of a loop, man. I mean, last night was awesome. I mean, both of those wins were kind of not even in question. It was like the teams that I went against, Tampa and the Mets, like couldn't even score at all. I had good pitching performances from Eflin on Baltimore and Miller on Seattle. So those are nice. No sweat wins. Basically, one was a shutout with Bryce Miller on Seattle. And I think Baltimore was Baltimore was shutting out Tampa for most of the game too. So it was like, yeah, the teams that I went against, I think scored one combined run or two combined runs or something, whatever it was. It's a nice way to do it. Yeah, one run. Just Tampa scored a run late. I think they were losing 4-0 in that game. All right, looking at today's card, again, this one's throwing me a bit, and there are a few ways that I was kind of looking, and I'm like, I don't think I could really do that. Like, I kind of was maybe eyeing an under in Cincinnati and Milwaukee, just because Milwaukee has been scoring so much recently that you got to think at some point that has to change to some extent, and that's Nick Martinez against Tobias Myers. Nick Martinez has been pitching pretty well, but he's been coming out of the bullpen for the most part, but he's a guy who's going to come in. If he starts, he's probably going to go like 4, maybe 5 innings potentially, which is what he has done, I think, in a couple of his starting performances. He's been pretty good, even though he's a bit older, but again, most of that out of the bullpen, but he has held Milwaukee to some really low offensive numbers too, like a sub 200 batting average. And then Tobias Myers, who I've talked about on this channel, because I always talk about these rookies who have never been seen before by the opposing hitters. He's never been seen before by the Cincinnati Reds, so I think he has a little bit of an advantage early on too, and he's been pitching well this season as well. I was kind of looking at an under there, but it's not one that I quite want to do. It's a little sketchy with teams that can hit like this. You're looking at under 8 right now. It's dropped from 8.5 juice to the under down to 8 juice to the over. So maybe a slight tick down, but it looks like 74% of the tickets and 79% of the cash on the over in that one. So the over is public. I mean, the public's not going to come in and look at a Brewers-Reds game and think, oh, I want to take the under here, especially with a couple of pitchers they aren't really familiar with. I don't know. It's just not something that's going to quite make my card here. I think my Red Sox are in a pretty bad spot, to be honest. And it looks like the market is moving against them. I'm tempted to do this one and to play Houston, but the one thing that kind of keeps me away from it is that the Red Sox returned from a road trip yesterday, and that's always a tough spot. Like I said, it's a spot where you return home. You have the home distractions coming into play, and then if you don't play well, then you tend to play better in the next game. The Red Sox actually started out well. They actually got a pretty good start out of Houck, who was pretty good. And then the bullpen just completely fell apart. And the Red Sox actually did okay against Blanco, who they've never seen before. Mr. Pine Tar on hands, I think, Ronel Blanco. So I actually leaned it to Houston yesterday, and Houston did win, but not for the reason that I thought. It was just because the Red Sox, I think, kind of ran out of steam, and maybe the bad situation and the distractional spot did come into play there. But the Red Sox started out well and looked like they were probably going to win the game, and the bullpen totally imploded there and blew it for Houck, which sucks. But after a game like that, the second game back home does tend to be a more positive spot for that home team. But looking at the matchup here, I just don't think that it is. Red Sox have dropped from -125 to -114, so they're a very slight favorite. 59% of the, 59% of the tickets, 55% of the cash. So the Red Sox are slightly public and have less of the cash as well. So we see reverse line movement on this too. And I do think I agree with it just because of the pitching matchup here. I think this is a bad pitching matchup for the Red Sox. Spencer Arrighetti is pitching for Houston, and he's starting to turn it on, man. He had a really bad start to the season. He's a young dude. I think he was a rookie last year maybe, and he's started out awful, and his stats on the season are really awful, like his ERA and WHIP. But then if you go and you look, it's just because he's been really wild. His amount of walks is really high, but his amount of strikeouts is really high. He's allowed a couple too many hits, but he's also been changing it up, man. He's been good in the last 5 outings that he's had. He's gone at least 5 innings in every one of the outings and allowed 4 or fewer earned runs in every outing and allowed 3 or fewer in all but one of those against Oakland, or maybe he just wasn't focused, even though Houston didn't score for him and lost every single one of those games. He pitched pretty well in those games. And even though, he still had too many walks, his strikeout number was also really high, and he wasn't really allowing a lot of runs. He had 12 strikeouts in his most recent start against Tampa. So that tells me he may really be starting to turn it on here. And the Red Sox have never seen him before. So I think that's a disadvantage to the Red Sox. And the Red Sox have Josh Winkowski pitching. He's no good. I mean, he's got a 3.44 ERA. So people might look at that and think maybe he is good. Nah, he is not. He was almost entirely a relief pitcher last year. And again, his ERA looked good last year, but his whip was terrible last year. I don't know how his ERA was sub 3 last year with a whip of almost 1.5, which is about what it is on his entire career. His strikeout rate's not good. His walk rate, way too high, both on his career and this season. There's nothing to like about Winkowski, man. And against these Houston hitters in a 13 at-bat sample size, they've hit him 6 for 13, so 462 batting average and 1,115 OPS. I don't think Winkowski is the right side of that one. So I lean against the Red Sox. I agree with the market on that one, even though just it being a positive spot for the Red Sox kind of keeps me off it a little bit. I think game 2 in the Yankees-Texas doubleheader here, because they have to play a doubleheader because they got rained out yesterday, and the pitching matchup actually flip-flopped, I think. So I think it was supposed to be Bradford for Texas against Rodon for the Yankees last night, and now Rodon is pitching the first game for Texas up against Eovaldi, and Bradford is pitching the second game today against Garrett Cole. And that actually, I think, is a worse matchup for the Yankees in that one. Cody Bradford's a young left-hander, and he's got good stats this season, man, although he hasn't really had too many deep outings, but in his first few outings of the season, he did actually go fairly deep, and he's got a good strikeout walk ratio, low walk rate, low hit rate. He's been good, and the Yankees have essentially never seen him before. Only 2 of their hitters have seen him before, and they're 0 for 2 off him with a strikeout and a walk. So the Yankees are coming in, going to have to figure out Bradford. And I always say, like I just said with Tobias Myers, when you have a young, good pitcher, they tend to have an advantage early on against hitters who haven't seen him before. So I think that's going to be the case there with Texas with Cody Bradford. And on the other side, Garrett Cole, he seems to be losing steam, man. Even though he's only 33 years old, he's not that old. He just has not gotten it together yet this year, and has a high ERA over 5, almost a 1.5 whip. He just hasn't been good. His walk number has been high. He's been allowing too many hits, too many home runs. Strikeout rate is good, but other than that, he's been struggling. And his numbers against Texas's offense are not good in a giant sample size. They've seen him a ton, 130 at bats worth. They have knocked him around a lot, even though he has a lot of strikeouts against him, a good strikeout walk rate, but they hit him almost 300 and 872 OPS. So I would look only to Texas in the second game of that series, Bradford against Cole, and that line has dropped on the Yankees from minus 190 to minus 175. So you're getting Texas as a big underdog. Potentially you could play him at plus 1.5 runs or something to get closer to like a spread type of line there, closer to the minus 110, and then sprinkle on the money line. 67% of the tickets on the Yankees, they are public over Texas, even though Texas are the World Series champs. They haven't been doing as well as the Yankees this year. But 92% of the cash on Texas in that one. So I lean to Texas in that one in game 2 of that doubleheader. And I do have a strong lean to the Atlanta Braves. I think something's got to give, man. The Braves have lost a bunch of games in a row, but most of them were to Milwaukee. I mean, they had a couple of bad games against some bad team. I think it was Miami maybe before that. Not great. I think maybe splitting a series with Miami or something. But then Milwaukee swept them. But Milwaukee is one of the better teams in the National League. So Atlanta, even though, they're not playing very well right now, I think this is a spot for them. They had a tough spot yesterday, having to go out to Colorado, having to go into elevation. I don't think that's the best spot. And they had to face Tanner Hudson, I think is his name, for Colorado, who was, I think, an unfamiliar, like, young pitcher to them. So that's not really that easy to do either if you're the Braves. And the Braves, Tanner Gordon is his name. And the Braves had Grant Holmes, I think is his name, who's not really a starter. I wouldn't say he's kind of a converted reliever. You don't expect that much out of him, even though he did have a lot of strikeouts yesterday. He struggled, put way too many men on base, and Gordon was pretty good. Braves still almost had a chance to win that game. But I think it's going to turn around tonight after Colorado gets a big win over Atlanta in that game. Atlanta's now adjusted to being in elevation, adjusted to the time zone, whatever. I think they're going to come out and play much better in this game and finally end that ridiculous loss streak they're on. That's 6 games, something like that. Max Fried is pitching this time. He has much better numbers this year. He's coming off an ugly performance, which was his only start after the All-Star game. I think maybe he was injured or something. because he didn't pitch right away after he pitched in the All-Star game. He only made one start after that, and maybe just that the schedule of being shifted around and not having pitched in a while. Maybe he came in and just struggled for that reason against Miami of all teams. He walked way too many guys in that game, just really didn't have it, and pitched horribly in the game against Miami. But now I think he's in a bounce back spot. He's on his regular rest now. I think he's going to be ready for this one and pitch a lot better. His ERA is good on the season. His whip is only slightly high to my liking at 1.2. His strikeout rate, not horrible this year. Walk rate, a little bit iffy, but he hasn't allowed many hits at all. He's been pitching pretty well for the most part. And up against Colorado in a 48 at-bat sample size, they only hit him 146 is what their opponent batting average is against him at a 441 OPS. Very, very weak offensive numbers for Colorado against Max Fried. So that bodes well for Max Fried. On the other side, you have the much worse pitcher in Dakota Hudson. I think I said Tanner Hudson. Tanner Gordon was the pitcher last night, the young guy for Colorado. Dakota Hudson, not as young. He's been around for a while, mostly with St. Louis, and hasn't really had a great career. He's been a serviceable pitcher, I would say, in the majors. He did have a couple of seasons where he had a low ERA, but still a high whip. So his whip has really never been that great, especially when he's had seasons where he's made a lot of starts. He's just put way too many men on base. Doesn't have a high strikeout rate at all. His walk rate is too high. His numbers are just not good on his entire career, and they're similar this season. He's really struggled. He hasn't been good. And up against the Braves hitters, I think he has bad numbers against them. In 56 at-bats, the Braves hit him over 300. He has a 12-10 strikeout walk ratio against them, 820 OPS. So that looks like a big pitching mismatch to me, and it is reflected in the line with the Braves being a huge road favorite, up from minus 175 to minus 185, 74% of the tickets. So public's still coming in on the Braves side as they know they're the better team. They're the big name team, not caring about this recent loss streak when it comes to Atlanta playing a bad team like Colorado. But they do have 94% of the cash on them. So I do like Atlanta. I would lay the run line on that one probably. I just think it's enough of a mismatch, and Atlanta can score enough that I think they should be able to win that game by margin in that one, but we will see. And then the game I'm actually going to be on before I get out of here, this is going to be a bit of a quick video, rolling through a lot of these games really quickly, man. So hopefully that's helpful. The game I'm going to be on is going to be on an over in St. Louis, Kansas City. These teams just played yesterday, and I know it was a high-scoring game yesterday too, a 13-run game, but Kansas City really used a lot of their bullpen yesterday. They used 6 relief pitchers yesterday. The Cardinals used 3, but they used a lot of their better relievers. They used Helsley, who has a lot of saves this season. He's one of their best relievers. Obviously, he's their closer. Kittredge also pitched for them yesterday in relief. They saved the rest of their bullpen with Liberatore pitching for 3 innings, but Kittredge is one of their better relievers as well. So I think the bullpen situation, not great. Neither of these teams have great bullpens anyway, really, but the Royals really used a ton of relief pitchers yesterday, so they're going to have a lot of guys who may be unavailable today. Cardinals used a couple of their best relievers, so they might be unavailable today as well. So I don't think the bullpen shapes up very well for a pitching matchup in this one. And then, of course, I don't think the starting pitching matchup does either. And you're going to see that these are actually pitchers that are actually familiar to these opposing hitters, too. Andre Palante is pitching for St. Louis. He's a young guy, but his stats aren't good this year. 4.43 ERA, 1.37 whip. Those are high numbers. He's been coming out of the bullpen and making starts and making opener type of starts. So recently, he's been making longer starts. He's been going deeper into some games as a starter. And he's been serviceable, but he's had some bad games. He's coming off a bad game against the Mets, who can hit pretty well. But Kansas City is also a tough team to face at their home stadium. They're a really good team at home, so I think that's going to hurt. I don't think Palante is really that good in general. Really, 51 to 25 strikeout walk ratio is not good. That's too many walks. It's a low strikeout rate in 67 innings pitched. He's allowed 67 hits as well. He hasn't been that great a pitcher. I don't think he's that good. He's kind of an innings eater. That's what he does. Comes in, he's just a guy. You get some innings out of him. You get an arm. Against Kansas City, his numbers actually aren't that bad. They're 8 for 30 off him with 3 doubles, a home run, 5 RBIs, 5-1 strikeout walk ratio, 267 batting average, not that high, but a 757 OPS, getting a little bit into the higher range. And again, like I said, he's just not that great a pitcher. Even though he's okay against Kansas City in his career, he also did just face Kansas City. So that's going to be the other reason for this over here, even though this is an interleague game, and it is the interleague rivalry between the geographic rivals, St. Louis and Kansas City. But that means these teams are more familiar with these pitchers, really. And like I said, both of these pitchers just pitched in the recent series that these teams had over in St. Louis. Palante pitched. He had a 5-0 strikeout walk ratio in his outing in that one. Kansas City won the game 6-4. Palante went 6 1/3. None of those numbers are that bad, but he did give up 4 earned runs in 6 innings. It was a mediocre start for him, not terrible, but the fact that Kansas City just saw him, I think, is going to help Kansas City's offense because they're used to facing him. There's recent familiarity there. They just saw him exactly a month ago. So I think that helps. Then on the other side, Michael Wacha is pitching. He's facing his former team, yeah, but it's been a while, so I don't think he's going to get pumped up for facing his former team for the who knows how many times at this point he's faced his former team. It's been a lot, but he's been okay this year in his older age. He's kind of he's 33. I thought he was a little bit older, actually. He's always been more of a command pitcher, not really a high heat strikeout guy. He's got a 3.55 ERA this year, 1.24 whip, so that doesn't look bad. So that might be giving you maybe a little bit of value coming into actually playing over here with the ERAs maybe not being totally indicative of what these pitchers actually are, especially Wacha. He's got a 93-35 strikeout walk ratio, so he is kind of a walker. He walks too many guys. His strikeout rate not high. He's allowed only 106 hits, all that in 114 innings. So the amount of hits isn't that bad, but other than that, he's not a strikeout guy. He walks too many guys. He's coming off a decent outing, kind of, against Detroit, where he went 6 innings. He had 7 hits, 2 earned runs, but he walked 4 guys in that game and only struck out 2. So that's not a good sign when your strikeout walk ratio is inverted like that. That's not great. So he probably got lucky in that one a little bit, putting 11 base runners on his 6 innings and getting out of there, only allowing 2 runs. Getting out of jams, you might say there. He has pitched well, though, as far as the earned runs allowed. He hasn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in any start going all the way back to May 4th. So does that worry me a little bit as far as an over here? Yeah, it does a little bit, but he's not that great a pitcher. The rest of his stats aren't that great. And what the clincher is for me is we have a big sample size to work with him against St. Louis, and St. Louis has done well against him. Wacha has really struggled against these hitters. They're 32 for 93 off him lifetime with 9 doubles, a triple, 7 homers, 17 RBIs. 23-11 strikeout walk ratio, a 344 batting average, and 1,102 OPS. So Wacha has really struggled against these St. Louis hitters. Those are really good offensive numbers against him. And as with the other side of this with Palante, Wacha also pitched in that same game on July 10th against St. Louis, and he didn't pitch well, really. He had a 3-1 strikeout walk ratio in 5 innings, which is fine, but he allowed a home run, 3 earned runs, 4 runs, 7 hits allowed. So he was putting a lot of guys on base in that one. So both of these pitchers struggled a little bit in that game. Actually, that was a doubleheader, actually, I think. So they pitched in different games of a doubleheader. Excuse me. My mistake. Because this game was an 8-5, Kansas City win. And the game Palante pitched in, I think I said it was a 6-4. Kansas City wins, something like that. So I think it was a doubleheader on the same day, July 10th. And each of these pitchers pitched in opposing games in that doubleheader. So they didn't pitch against each other. They pitched in different games of the doubleheader, I believe. But either way, both these pitchers faced these opposing hitters exactly a month ago and didn't really do well in that one either. Wacha doesn't have good numbers against St. Louis at all, really. So you have recent familiarity on the sides of both of these offenses as well. So that's why I like this to go over for all those reasons. Both of these opposing lineups just saw these guys a month ago, so they're familiar with these pitchers. And these pitchers aren't that great to begin with, really. Looking at the market, we see it's actually moved to the under slightly, from 9 juice to the under to 9 juice, a little bit more heavily to the under. And we see 57% of tickets on the under is what I'm seeing, but I am seeing 98% of the cash on the over. So I do think that maybe there is a cash discrepancy on the over in this one, even though it looks like for some reason the majority of the tickets are coming in on the under in this one. I don't understand why, but that's my one play today is an over. You can get it at over 9 right now at even money, 9 plus 100, even though you're sitting on the key number. So if it lands exactly 9, it'll push. You can get over 8.5, but you have to lay like minus 122. So I'd rather just go over 9 plus 100 right now. That's the only play for me today, man. Kansas City and St. Louis in baseball. Over 9 at plus 100. And I'll mention, of course, there is a full slate of preseason NFL today, which I'm not going to get in deep into these games. I mean, again, like I said, you have to look at which teams have like veteran backups and stuff like that who are going to be playing in these games and who you might want to bet on, like teams that have a more veteran rotation that's going to get involved in a game like this. What I forgot to mention, I mentioned in the comments yesterday, was I leaned to Houston yesterday. Maybe I should have played Houston, the Texans, because they had already played a preseason game in the Hall of Fame game and won it. So they had already gotten that game out of the way, played the game, and that meant that they were going to play C.J. Stroud last night, and they did. He was in there early in the game, and I think he had a touchdown in the game as well. So that was an advantage to the Texans because I think the Steelers were not going to be rolling out their starter. Russell Wilson, I think, is probably their starter. I don't think he played last night. So you had an advantage on the Texans side because they already had a game under their belt in the preseason. We're already used to it. And they were going to have CJ Stroud out there for a bit. And Houston did win the game and cover. I think they were -2.5 or something like that. So I should have mentioned that. Today, maybe a similar spot as you're going to get Bears, Bills here. Bears also played in that preseason game, the Hall of Fame game, and lost to the Texans. So that means the Bears, we might see Caleb Williams, #1 overall draft pick, come out in this game. But he's not a proven quantity like Stroud. So I think the Houston play last night was a lot better, actually, because Stroud, you know how good he is at this point. He's got an entire season under his belt, and he was going to come out knowing what to do. Whereas that might not be the case for Caleb Williams here, even though you are going to get him, I believe, today for a little bit at least, and he is going to be the starter for the Bears. I think that you don't know exactly what you're going to get out of him. And the market actually, even though the market was on Houston yesterday, it looks like it's against the Bears in this one. They're playing the Bills. Bills are going to be public probably, even though there is hype around Caleb Williams. Looking at last year, what these teams did, the public's only going to want to come in on the Bills side. But if this is the first Bills preseason game, you're probably not going to get Josh Allen or any of those starters in this one. But the line is still moving in the direction of the Bills, actually. It's up from -1 to -3 on the Bills. 65% of the tickets on them, but 77% of the cash. So it looks like there is some legitimate movement coming in on the Bills, even though there's some public on the Bills. It looks like the professional agreement is also coming in on the Bills to more of a degree, even though the Bears did already play that preseason game and have Caleb Williams probably playing in this game for a little bit. Apparently the bettors don't think that that's that much of an advantage to the Bears, and I maybe would tend to agree, as you're actually maybe it's even a disadvantage somewhat to the Bears because you're going to have Caleb Williams playing his first preseason game. Maybe he's going to be a bit nervous, whereas whoever the Bills' backup is likely somebody with – I don't even know who it is, but I'm assuming it's somebody who has experience at the very least. So maybe they actually have somewhat of an advantage there for that reason. So just figured I'd comment on that one game because it's the game that I know more about. There's a little bit more going on in that situation than some of these other games. Or the rest of these games are all the first preseason game for all the rest of these teams, I believe. Have a good one, man. Once again, baseball, the one play is Kansas City, St. Louis over 9. Peace out, man.